Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the World Explorer podcast. This is the podcast where every week we take a random prompt and build an entire world around it. My name is Casey, and as always, I'm joined by Isaac.
Hello there! So, today we are world building instruments. I came up with this idea while we were playing a card game called Here to Slay, and it had, your D&D style, set up a party, and there was a picture of a bard, and he had what looked like a banjo made of wind. And that got me thinking, what if we could have instruments that controlled the elements? Like, this is your elemental system. There's a bunch of elemental systems out there, but this one, you gotta play instruments to control the elements.
So you're saying I would never be able to do it?
In this world, I'm thinking that it's not all instruments, obviously, otherwise that could cause problems if you just wanted to listen to music.
I don't know. I think that could be fun. Every time you listen to music, something sketchy happens to the weather, so you always have to be careful what you're listening to or what you create.
Yeah, but then people would be probably listening to music less often, and then you got problems where if you got multiple people playing music at once in the same area, that could cause some really wonky weather, and you might set something on fire if you've got a fire element. It just comes with problems.
So the question is, would that problem cause very specific type of music to formulate, like safe music, whatever that means? Or would that problem lead to just music just ceasing to exist except in rare circumstances when it's needed?
I'm a little lost by your question.
Like would there be types of music that were safe? Like, even if it was played, it did, like, minor things with elements that it wasn't a big deal to listen to it, and that would be what people listen to?
Small, it's something like a slower coffee house music, it would be fine, but then if someone were to play a rock ballad, suddenly, flames start shooting out everywhere uncontrollably.
Yeah, so it's one where certain music becomes okay, other music wouldn't, just because of what it would do. But if you have someone who's really passionate about a specific type of music and wants to play it and can't, then you have a story.
That could absolutely work for a story. I mean, if you want to go that route, if you want to go the route of world where all music causes some sort of elemental shift or whatever, we can.
I think all that it really has to offer is that one specific type of story, so we can go back to just building instruments and seeing what happens.
Just some that are enchanted, some that are not.
Yeah.
Okay. So
would these enchanted instruments have to be made out of that element? Meaning, like, being able to control fire takes a lot more special items that a person has to use than, say, wind.
I don't think they would actually be made out of the element. That was just what the initial picture looked like. I think that it's more you play the instrument and then the element starts to appear around you, or maybe from the instrument, or you summon it from the sky or wherever else. Because if the element is the instrument, then you've got problems where if it's made of fire, you cannot hold it. If it's made of wind and you try to set it down, it might start knocking stuff over. If it's made of electricity, you cannot hold it. All this different stuff. So if it's made of rock, you'd be very, very heavy. So
I think
if
it was the element trapped inside of something that gives it its shape. So it's still fire, but it has a special wrapping, like the magical wrapping, that allows you to hold it and not have to worry about setting your house on fire if you put the instrument down.
Okay. I like that idea. So
yeah, a rock one would still be heavy. So it would take a especially strong type of person to play a rock to control the earth. And maybe it's still hot, like a fire one's still hot, so there's still, you'll have to have a high heat tolerance or something.
Yeah, it's just that it's not gonna burn you. It's just,
Yeah.
it's like more like carrying around a summer day on your back or something. Yeah. So what would the magical item be that is keeping the elements from harming the wielder? So I imagine like it would be like some sort of magical stone.
It'd be see-through, so that way you could tell magical instruments easily.
I mean, I think you can tell what a magical instrument is because the magical instrument is made of fire.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, the casing would have to be see-through. Like, so that way you could see it's made out of fire.
Oh, well, I wasn't thinking, like, there would actually be, physical, like, casing that you could see. I was thinking that it's more like an invisible magic barrier.
Okay.
That just sort of enwraps the can't think of it now, the instrument that you're holding.
Yeah.
This way, it would look like you're actually holding a guitar made out of fire, but you're just not getting burned.
So could you encase anything? Like, could you encase flowers and then be able to manipulate, or like dried flowers, I should say, and then be able to manipulate those?
I mean, I guess if these stones could be tethered to the flowers, and that could be considered an element, and then you put those stones inside of an instrument, then yes?
I mean, why couldn't you just have an instrument made up of dried flowers?
I guess you could.
I mean, if you have one made out of wind, at least this one has some substance to it.
Well, I think maybe we need to figure out how these stones are made exactly. Like, where are they coming from? Who or what is making them? Are they found? Or...
What do you mean stones? Are we saying that, like, that...
Well, I thought what it was that the stone was like the magical element that allows the instrument to be held together.
Oh, I probably missed that entire part.
Oh.
So I was just thinking this was a special magic spell or something that can encase an object that then allows you to control that element.
Oh, no, I was thinking of it as the stone was the thing that encases the object in the magical barrier.
So you're playing a stone?
No, you're playing an instrument that is infused with a stone that gives it the elemental ability.
Okay, but it's still, the instrument itself, though, is still made out of that element.
Yes.
It just has the centerpiece that's a stone that creates the magic spell that encases it.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're on the same page again.
Okay. And, this stone... like, if you were to use this stone... to control something like dried flowers, I guess maybe you could, but that's why we have to address, like, how are these instruments created? Like, where do these stones come from? Who is making them? Can they be made into things beyond, like, the basic 4 elements that you generally see? What all elements are allowed or are available?
You talked about things like lightning and stuff, so I have to imagine that these are stones that can be found, and maybe it's a luck that it gets them infused with a magic being, so like these stones can just be found randomly. So some stones just happen to get elements associated with them. Like a stone got struck with lightning in such a way that it infused itself with lightning, and now that stone can be turned into an instrument if found by someone who has the magical abilities to manipulate it into that.
Okay, so if a stone being struck by lightning is how the lightning element comes to be, how do other stones come to be? So like a fire stone.
I think it's just luck. Like, occasionally you make a fireplace and one of your stones starts glowing weird.
I guess that could work.
It could it could be like a chosen person trope in that the stones get associated with people, so certain people can activate stones without meaning to. They have an experience with an element and a stone around it, and that happens. And it could be a musical gift. So, like, if someone's, I don't know, you're around the campfire and you're singing a song, and suddenly the stone starts glowing because of that. So it could be activated by music as well. Don't ask how music is, who's playing music during a thunderstorm outside so a lightning strike can be harnessed by a stone, but someone might be. Especially if this is a society in which that's something that people know could happen.
I think what's more likely is they're playing music inside a tent or something, and then the lightning strikes a nearby stone.
Yeah, something like that could happen. And then you have a lightning stone, and that could add an interesting element if you wanted, that only certain people can activate the stone. So, like, the stone's really closely tied to that one person, and it's only their voice that can activate it and tune it into an instrument. Or, or their music ability, I should say. Because everyone has a distinct musical ability that's usually people can tell the difference between, so a magical stone should be able to as well.
Okay, so only the person who caused the stone to have its elemental capabilities is the person who can play the instrument to activate the stone.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now you have a group of very special people.
So I imagine in this world, music would probably be a lot more common, because I imagine there's people who are playing music just hoping to get lucky one day.
That's true. Everyone wants it, but not everyone is blessed. Then you get a story of characters who are going around trying every single instrument, musical, and element mixture that they can think of until they can find their own special one. You're like, eventually one of these has to work, right?
Yep. And now something else I'm thinking about is, how does this affect warfare? So let's say you had two armies rushing into battle against each other, but you had people who could, say, summon lightning to strike the opposing army. Like, how much lightning are they able to strike? Like, how is there a limit to it? Because you could wipe out an entire army with something like that if you can strike fast enough.
Like, my first thought when you said that, though, was like, oh, that war music that's in our head when we see, like, violent battle things is just no longer in our head. It's actually happening on the battlefield now.
Like, if somebody were to make a movie out of this, they could actually have their epic combat.
It would be terrible. The music would be terrible. Do you get, like, you'd have, like, 12 people with distinct musical styles all trying to outplay each other. It's gonna sound awful. But I still think it'd be fun.
I'm sure that there is some composer out there who would find a way to make it work.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. They'd have to for this big screen. But in reality, if this was a legit world, I think we can agree that war probably sounds terrible on a new level. Because now not only do you have the screams of pain, death, and torture, you also have very competing musical styles all clashing with each other. You also have lightning being summoned, and that's just loud.
Yeah, that would be louder than the music itself.
Yeah. Dramatic for a movie, very impractical.
And how powerful of, like, wind can you summon? Is it like a small breeze to move a napkin, or can you summon tornadoes?
Does this count on, like, how gifted the people are? Like, now there's gifted within the gifted? Like, some people never get... Once you finally get your gifts of music, you've been selected, yay! But then you make your instrument and you find out, like, some people have the ability to do cooler things than others. Like, one person with the lightning ability can summon a lightning bolt if they build up enough power to do so, while another person can just have a full-blown thunderstorm going at any moment they please. one person with wind can make light breezes and things and cool people off in the summer day, while another person can make a full-blown tornado. But you could also have the situation where some people, that's all they can do is like make a tornado. Like that's it. So now they got this really cool musical ability, but they can't really use it because it's too destructive.
Yeah, maybe it's somewhat tied to the person's ability to play music, but also tied to the distinct style. So maybe a style that is faster paced would summon a lot more quick bursts of wind if they had wind, or a lot of small bolts of electricity. But if they but maybe if they had a slower style, there could be, or if they had a style that liked to build up music over time, then they could build up to something like a tornado, slowly getting more and more powerful.
It could also depend on the type of instrument that they pick.
Yeah, because
like, can you imagine a flute being able to make a tornado?
I mean, maybe. I mean, it is a wind-based instrument, like you're blowing into it.
Like, it can get quick-paced, but it's also a softer instrument. Like, there's also sound and that type of thing. Like, flutes are considered softer compared to something like a drum.
Yeah, which would probably cause an earthquake.
Or, yeah, or, like, what would a harp do? Like, do we really think a harp is going to go out there and set fire to the world?
Probably not. I imagine harp as more of a either wind or water.
So are we saying that certain specific type of instruments get connected to certain elements just in general?
Maybe.
Or is this a person, like you've got your element-based thing.
They're connected to the stones, so I think what's more likely...
So the person gets to choose the instrument, right?
Yes, and so I think maybe there's just certain actions through certain instruments that would amplify certain characteristics of certain elements. There was a lot of certains in that. So basically, if you had the earth element, you would not want to put that in a flute, because the flute is too soft. The flute's not a super, like, overpowering instrument or anything. It's not the sort of thing that could move something big and heavy like a rock. It would work better with fire, but it still wouldn't necessarily be great. But it might work best with wind. But
this also introduces like a really interesting element, because just because you can play one instrument doesn't mean you can play other instruments.
And just because you have one element doesn't mean that you can control that element very well because of the instrument you're playing.
Or you just make the decision to encase that element in an instrument that you can play, even if it may not be seen as the best instrument for that element, just because, hey, at least I can keep it under control.
So if you were to, say, go into warfare, then you might want to stick your earth element into some drums. But if you wanted to go into something like...
Can you switch instruments?
I don't think so. I think that it's...
I thought, like, once you make the instrument, I think it should be sealed in the instrument. Like, that you have one choice. You have this stone, you get to pick one instrument, and you're stuck.
I agree.
Otherwise, I think people could switch it too much, and it ruins, like, the dramatic chance and decision-making.
It becomes too powerful. It doesn't feel as limited. So yeah, you get one instrument.
Yeah, I think story-wise, it's cooler if you have this... So now you could have the story of this kid who has this element, like, say, earth, but they can only play the flute. And they know it's weaker, and everyone's saying, no, you should just learn how to play the drums. But their passion is the flute. This is the instrument they love to play. But they're being torn by, like, what they love to play versus the desire to have a very powerful control over the elements. Then throw in the idea that their nation is at war, and they need warriors who can fight with elements better. And so now he's having pressure in that sense to turn his element into something that he can't play as well. But then there's also the fear of him not being able to control it because it's not his element, and it's just a whole thing.
Yeah, and the thing is, I imagine he could, if he were to go to war with his flute that could do earth, maybe there would be sort of that maybe he could actually learn to use it in such a way that is very different from how people typically use drums. Because people say, oh, you stick it in drums, you slam the drums, and suddenly you've opened up a crater underneath your opponents. But maybe there's some sort of a certain advantage to using a flute that people don't take into account because it takes so much practice that no one really has ever bothered to go this far with it, where it is extremely mobile because it's light, whereas the drums are not. And he can carry it around, and he blows into it a couple times, and he can open up a small, like, a crevice in the earth somewhere. Or maybe he has more control over a flute than the drums have. Maybe the drums are more chaotic, and there's less control over, like, the exact targeting of them, where exactly the earthquakes happen or where craters form or whatever. Whereas flute, he can have, like, pinpoint accuracy. He may not be able to bring a mountain down, but he can. But if he sees like there's a 5-on-1 fight and he needs to save his one teammate against these 5 enemies, he can take out every single one of those enemies because he can open up a small hole in the earth underneath each one of them without a problem.
There's also like a whole structure idea. Say you're in a big city, but you only need to take out one building full of people, full of the enemy, or that you know is like a secret spy base or something. A drum person can't do that, but the flute person just plays his little flute and can pinpoint the structure weaknesses of this one building. And if he's smart enough and has learned how structures work and have a bit of education in that sense, he could hit the points in such a way that the building collapses in on itself, only takes out the people inside, and doesn't hurt anything else.
This is where you get somebody who is in construction, which I imagine is also something that is kind of a big deal for people with instruments. Like, you can build a lot of stuff if you have the power of all these different elements, and there would probably be certain elements that could do certain things in construction better than others. And you could go to one of these construction people and be like, okay, where do I need to take down the building? And be like, oh, here's a weak point, here's a weak point, here's a weak point, and then he uses the flute to take him down.
Or imagine if we do have since I think plant life could be something, or control of plants could be something that's targeted, being able to produce food or do farming and stuff like that with just an instrument.
So what kinds, maybe we should figure out what elements can be used. So we've got fire, earth, air, water, you know, those basic ones, lightning. What else? And what determines what can be used as an element? Are there, like, certain gods that they're tied to? Or are they just, you know, basic elements that we have in the world? Can it be anything?
I think it has to have a physical representation. I think it has to be something natural like not man-made. So it has to have a natural connection to Earth itself, and it has to be something physical that you can actually make an object out of.
So
you can't
make something out of fire or air or lightning. You
can't, but there's still like a physical element to that. Like, you can still feel wind. Like, sure, we can't contain wind. Well, we kind of can. But you can still feel it, and you can still condense it, and you can still trap it. But you can't do that to something like sunlight. So there's no way that there's going to be a sunlight element. Because that
I don't see why not. Because sunlight is still essentially a physical object. And I've never heard of anybody trapping it, but you can still use its physical attributes to do stuff. You can still use it in a magnifying glass to heat stuff up. You can use solar panels to gather the energy, to trap the energy from it. You can use solar sail to fly through space as the photons bounce off of it. Like, I don't see why a sunlight stone couldn't exist.
I guess I just don't see sunlight as being as touchable as some other things.
I stick my hand out the window and I feel the heat of the sun. I feel like I'm touching something there.
Yeah, but at what point is that just fire or lightning or something like that?
True. The sun would probably also be considered fire.
Yeah, that's more of my thought. It's like a lesser fire being. Like, I also don't think you could trap a rainbow or anything.
Well,
like
you
that
can.
either.
You can't even touch a rainbow, so.
Just, exactly. I'm trying to think how to describe the limit, but I do think there has to be a. It's something you. I think you have to be able to interact with it. Because, sure, we can feel sunlight, but you can't move sunlight.
My mirror begs to differ.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to trap because it comes from the sun, so it comes from, like, that source. It's not something that's moving, it's something that's connected to something bigger that you can't actually interact with. Like, the wind is its own entity, but sunlight is coming from a star that's...
Okay, so you have to get the thing at the source.
Yes, that's it. Yes, you have to be able to have it at the source. You have the source of wind, you have the source for fire, earth. Lightning has a source that can interact with the rock. Sunlight does not.
Something like water, it can't come from rainfall, but it could maybe come from a lake.
I mean, technically, raindrops is the source of its own water.
True, but I think that
but you couldn't have a cloud element unless the rock was in the cloud.
Which I imagine could exist if someone was on a mountain.
If a person really, really wanted it.
Yeah, I mean, you
lucky.
could go on a mountain and clouds or even fog.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, you could have a fog element, I think, because of the source, but yeah.
Fog would be different from water because it's just sort of in a different state.
Yes. Same with ice, so you could have an ice element, and that would also be different. Just like lightning is a different state of fire.
You could have something like a flower element. It's just like, why the heck would you? It's like you've got a garden.
It would be I think it'd also be specific to the flower. I think that some poor soul might have just gotten a rock that's connected to something like carrots. So they can grow, mass-produce carrots. They can make a fortune. They can have a carrot empire. But at the end of the day, they can just grow carrots.
That's unfortunate. Something more useful would be like a tree. So you can grow wood. You could grow it maybe in whatever direction or shape that you want. So if you really wanted to, you could make an entire house out of trees that are just grown from the ground in a specific shape.
Keep in mind, it would be... I think it'd still be one.
Yeah, it would all be made of
tree.
one tree type. So all oak, all pine, just
but still,
whatever it is that happens to be made out of.
But the carrot person could make a giant carrot. And they could live out of it if they want. They just have to move house every few weeks because it would get moldy.
Yeah. And I don't know enough about carrots, but it might be that the bigger the carrot gets, the worse it would taste. So so people also probably wouldn't be making giant carrots to eat. I don't know if that's how a carrot would work or not, if it gets to that kind of size, because I know it works. That's how it works with some plants. Like I think cucumbers are that way.
You can magically grow a carrot. I think you could keep the flavor if you want.
Yeah, fair.
I feel like you have control over that. If you wanted to make a really tasty carrot, I don't know, maybe you could change the taste or something of carrots.
I don't think you can change it that much. I don't think you can change it from its original.
But I think you could keep the flavor. I think you can keep the flavor evenly distributed throughout the carrot.
Yeah, you just can't change the flavor.
Yeah, it's still a carrot. But otherwise, I think plants and being able to control plants would be very overpowered if you could do any plant. But the idea of people getting stuck with just one type of plant, I think, amuses me. And would make them a bit more common, probably.
Yeah, but I also have to wonder back to the idea of where these stones come from. So you can have things like a lightning strike causing a stone to form, but how would like a plant connect itself to a stone?
So it's growing near the stone, and someone singing some songs comes by. Rock glows. There you go.
It's just that there are plants everywhere, and so there would be basically nothing but plant instruments at that point. There's also earth
Well, I
everywhere,
think
so
it's
your
there-
stone might end up being linked to another stone,
Yeah.
and like that's totally possible. Like earth would be another very common one. That's how it worked.
I don't know. I guess there's also this idea of fate and the element choosing you.
I think that's probably best. It's whatever's tied to you, the individual, your personality, and what would work best for you. Which then you got people.
So the luck happens. The thing that makes this so hard to get and why these people are seen so lucky is that by chance they've discovered the music that best speaks to them next to an element that best speaks to them, and they happen to congeal together at the same time. So like lightning, that's a really rare one to have, probably, because you have to be, unless, but you know.
Yeah, because that would only be possible during a thunderstorm. So a thunder wouldn't be enough. You would need to be is like in
A lightning strike would have to strike down very close to you, like extremely close to you, and order to activate the stone, like dangerously
I
close
don't
to
necessarily
you
think that it would
have
need
a
to
stone
be
activated.
that close. Maybe if it's just overhead, like you're no longer counting between the lightning strike and the time it takes for the thunder to reach you. It's just as soon as you see lightning.
The stone has to be able to hear you making the music. And I think you also have to be kind of within sight of the stone, so you have to be able to see it.
So its range, I don't know. Yeah,
it's pretty small, which means that, yeah, that lightning strike is scary. And I don't know, do you have to keep singing when the lightning strikes down, so even though you just got jump scared, you still have to keep going in order to activate it? Or do you think you having sung well,
I think that would have been enough. Like, just the one strike is enough to infuse the stone. And then you take that stone, infuse it with an instrument, and then there you go. Now, how does one infuse the stone with the instrument? Do you just, like, place it on an instrument and then they magically fuse together? Is there some sort of ritual process? Do you have to go to an enchantress or a wizard or something?
I feel like this should be something they should be able to do by themselves, so I kind of like the idea of it being a pre-made instrument that just gets magically transformed when the stone gets added.
Yeah, I think that maybe it should be, you've got your instrument in hand, then you see the stone appear, you pick up the stone, and then they just fuse together.
I think there has to be a will to it, because again, being able to have that choice of a different instrument, I think, is an important part for stories. At least for the type of stories we've been suggesting. So I think it's more like you have your instrument, you see the stone appear, and then if you want to, you can pick it up and you can connect them to each other and you can will them together.
So you could be playing
and then they form together.
The flute when your lightning stone appears, but then you could say, I don't want this on my flute, and then instead stick it on your banjo.
Exactly. I mean, people are talented in multiple instruments, so they should have a right to pick what instrument they want. Some people, they're going to be like, well, this is the only instrument I know how to play, obviously I'm going to connect it to it. But other people are like, I could play any instrument. Let me think about this. And then they can have the time to think about it. Because again, it's not like they have to worry about someone stealing their stone and using it for themselves. They're the only ones who can fuse it to an instrument.
Yeah, so I think at this point, it's no longer a matter of play style is what determines whether or not you can use it. I think it's just a fate thing. Like, it's just destiny is what allows you to use it. You as the individual are now tethered to that stone and that instrument.
And that element.
Yes. Now, can the instruments be destroyed?
Oh, I think so. I think it's a very crushing thing, and I think it's a hard thing to do. But I think they should be able to be destroyed.
I'm gonna say you break the stone, you break the instrument.
Yes, but I think the stone is hard.
Yeah, so like fire, like an instrument made of fire, you can't really break that. Instrument made of wind, you can't really break that. But if you take a hammer and you hit the stone, that could break. That's like the one part that you could actually deal damage to, which causes the entire instrument to just shatter.
Which means that these people have to be very protective of their instruments.
Yes.
And their ability to hide them. And again, drums just sounds even dumber now as an instrument choice. Where are you going to hide that? How are you going to keep someone from smashing that up, you know?
This is assuming someone wants to smash it in the first place.
If it's war.
Yeah, if you're in war, I imagine your drummers are placed in the back and they're just hitting people from afar.
Yeah.
Assuming they can. Like, I don't know what the range is on these things.
I would... Not sure. How far of a range do you think magical drums that summon earthquakes would do? Or lightning, or whatever element they're associated with?
I mean, I think that maybe it's a skill-based thing. Like, the further away something or someone is, like, the further away the target is, the harder it is to hit it. Kind of like with, say, a gun or a bow and arrow.
Yeah.
Your accuracy is going to be lowered the further away the target is. And your control over the element will be weaker. And if you do not have the strength and willpower or the musical capabilities and skill to control something that is 500 feet away, you might lose control of the tornado, and instead of it going out of control and all over the place, it might just disappear.
Yeah. So another question I have. The voice is considered a musical instrument. Is that an instrument people can use? Can people fuse
I want to say no
themselves?
I really want to say no.
But also, wouldn't that be cool?
Maybe. It just feels so weird, and it's not like it's a physical object that you could use it to. It's an individual who is supposed to be tethered to the instrument and the stone that are fused together, not the stone itself directly tethered to the person. And also, if you hit that stone, that person instantly dies.
You kill the person, yeah.
And the fact that whenever you're talking, if you're talking, are you spitting out fire constantly from your mouth?
You'd also forget, like, visually, you would be turned into that element.
Yeah, that too. Like, I don't know about the idea of fusing someone who can sing with...
Could someone's, like, singing voice, though, activate an element? Like, sure, they have to associate it to an instrument now that they may not have any clue how to play, but could someone singing activate it? Because technically they're making music, and they're doing that.
Maybe?
And maybe you could put the stone and attach the stone to a person, and if someone just... And this is really dark, it could be an insta-death thing. So if someone really hates someone else, or say there's this there could be this, like, horrible arch enemy somewhere that they have to destroy, like, they have to take this person out. And they've realized that the only way they can do that is by turning that person into an instrument element. And so they find someone who hasn't used their stone yet, which I'm sure would be difficult in general, to find someone who has a stone they haven't turned into an instrument yet, and convince that person to sacrifice their really cool element instrument thing to go on a mission to bond it with a person to kill them.
Maybe. I'm just trying to figure out, like, why would you try and kill someone with the element, like, by fusing them rather than...
This is a world with magic. You can have a magical villain where that's the only way you can kill him.
Yeah, I mean, you can add in other forms of magic. Like, this could just be one element of a greater world, where you've got your standard wizard who throws fireballs. You've got your morphing spells. You've got your dragons and whatever else.
And you have a demon creature that can only be killed by being turned into a musical instrument.
Okay, maybe this could be a way of killing something like, say, I don't know, a mimic. Something that, because you're taking away its ability to change its form by bonding it to some sort of specific element or specific form.
And even then, I think you still get your instrument. It's just...
But this is... Wait. This is assuming that the mimic...
Weird shape.
Hold on, this is assuming that something like a mimic could actually be turned into an instrument. Does the person need to be able to sing that if you're going to fuse a person with it?
See, there is like this very dark idea that you now have just a person that's element shaped that can't actually make any music and doesn't actually have any use, and is kind of just a decor piece.
I'm leaning a little bit further away from the idea that you confuse a person or any creature with an element.
Look, it's just an idea I'm putting out into the world.
I think it might need to be a musical instrument, and the stone just is able to recognize what is an instrument and what is a creature.
Okay.
I think that with all these other complications and all these other questions of like what happens when they're bonded together and all that, I think the stone is just able to know.
I think you're right. I'm disappointed that you're right, but I think you are.
But I mean, if we were to do more world building, where we were to say the stone could be fused with literally anything and it didn't have to be an instrument, then yes, you could fuse it with a person or a creature and try to kill them that way. It's just that we've changed the world. It's no longer a world of musical instruments that control elements. It's now a world of any item can control an element, and your main protagonist just happens to play the flute.
No, yeah, you're right.
Which, I mean, that's a cool world too. That also works.
Yeah. It's just not the world we made.
Yeah, that's not the world we made. For this world specifically, it would not work. It's just instruments.
Okay.
If you want to go and write the world where anything can be turned into an element, then you can have your dark, twisted idea of turning people into elements and killing them that way, or turning them into decorative pieces. That works.
Look, you're the one who turned all of these elements into weapons. I don't know why you're sitting here judging me for my dark take of the world.
Because anytime you introduce some sort of new magical item or any sort of new tool, technology, whatever it is, one of the first things people are going to do is try and figure out how it can be weaponized. And that is a massive part of world building.
You can't judge me for coming up with a more creative way of weaponizing these stones.
I mean, yeah, I'm not judging you for coming up with a more creative way of weaponizing the stones. I'm trying to figure out whether or not your method of weaponizing the stones would work.
I don't think it'd work.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, would the weaponization that you've come up with work? And I think that, again, if they could be fused with anything, then yes. But in this world, it's just instruments, so no.
Yeah. Is there anything else we wanted to do, or you think we good with musical instruments? Elemental instruments?
I think we're good. We'll say that we'll also say that this takes place in like a standard fantasy world where other fantasy elements exist.
Obviously.
Dragons and goblins and other weird creatures, skeletons and stuff, and call it a day.
Sounds good. Better than the war would sound.
Better than the what?
I don't know. The war would sound. It'd be an interesting soundtrack. Just 12 people on drums, each playing their own song. As you hear the screams of pain in the background as lightning and fire and earthquakes destroy an army.
It would be such chaos.
It would sound so horrible. Like, war already sounds terrible. We just made it worse. You'd think adding musical instruments would make it better, but no. And on that pleasant note, we'll end the podcast.
Yep.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.